Welcome to the Realizations Podcast. I'm Andrea Gordon, your host, and I'm excited to explore the world of real estate with you. In a world where perceptions often overshadow reality, Realizations seeks to redefine what it means to be a realtor. Join me as we peel back the layers of the industry, uncovering inspiring stories and celebrating the good in real estate. Whether you're a homeowner, a fellow realtor, or simply curious, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Realizations, where perceptions meet reality. Let's dive right in. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Realizations. This is Andrea Gordon, your host. I am really excited. Today I have Will Hardy with me, who is, what is your official title, Will? What would you call yourself? Grand Poobah of the universe?
No, so I am Chief of Staff to the CEO of Compass, Robert Reffkin.
There you go. There you go. So, Will, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. How did you end up in this amazing position? What was your trajectory in life that got you to the point where you are the Chief of Staff for Robert Reffkin?
It's been a fun one, Andrea. So I've been at Compass for almost 8 years. It'll be 8 years this August. Originally, I was actually on a team at Compass we call Strategic Growth. So those are the people who are actually recruiting real estate agents to come over to Compass.
Right.
So I did that in New York City. I actually then opened our office in Houston, Texas. My wife now, but at the time girlfriend, moved to Houston with me while we were still just dating, which is pretty amazing. So we moved to Houston, lived there for 3 years. And then I opened Compass in Jacksonville, Florida, and Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2021. And towards the end of 2021, I got a phone call from someone who said that, Robert is looking for a new chief of staff, and was I interested? Had a couple conversations, and the rest is history. So it's been almost 4 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. That's super awesome. And what was your background before you got into recruiting?
Yeah, so I have a degree in economics. And so I really thought I wanted to go into finance. So I started actually my career at Bloomberg here in New York City on the equity side of things. And I wasn't really passionate about it. I think you find some of those things sometimes where you wake up in the morning and you're not excited, you're not kind of motivated by what you were doing. And I just wasn't. I wasn't excited. I wasn't motivated by what I was doing. And I ended up getting kind of connected to a recruiter. Compass at the time was kind of just in the beginning of this really big growth phase, which I'm sure we'll talk about later today. And the rest is history. I mean, I met Robert, and I remember leaving and saying, I don't really know much about Compass. I don't know much about him, but that's a very interesting person. Like, I'm very interested by him as a person. So let me do a little more research and do some digging.
Very cool. Yeah, similar thing happened to me with coming to Compass. Robert introduced himself. I thought he was amazing. Ajinder, I'm sure you worked with her. She's one of my dear friends, by the way. Yeah. And she, even though she's left Compass, I love and adore her. And she and I met many times. And I was very, very reluctant to come to a new company that I didn't really know very much about. But what I loved was the energy behind it. I loved the principles. I loved the really just the verve and the passion that I saw in the people that were working there. And so, given your background and given this background in economics and finance and all of that, tell me a little bit about how you see the company growing and how it fits into the economics of our time.
It's a great question. So, look, I think that there has never been a more exciting time to be in the real estate industry, right? There's a lot going on right now. And, something that I've witnessed over the past 8 years is I think there's kind of two things that are happening, right? One is there's the rise of discount brokerages, right? So companies that charge agents less, they provide less, those have been gaining in popularity, right? Really over the past 8 years since I've been at Compass. And then there's what I would call kind of like this fall happening to brokerages in the middle, where they haven't invested in technology. They have not focused on rebuilding their culture after COVID, right? Their in-office connectivity and culture. And I think more and more agents are saying, well, what am I paying you for, right? Remember, I always think about this. real estate agents are independent contractors, right? And you, Andrea, you can wake up and choose to bring your business to any brokerage that you want. And so
Right.
I think for us at Compass, what I've always tried to be focused on is how can we provide people like you or some of our 37,000 agents with value so that they wake up in the morning and say, I'm happy to be at Compass. I believe that being at Compass is helpful for my business. And so I say that because what I think is going to start to happen over probably the next 2 to 4 to 5 years, especially with technology, right? I mean, AI is the word of it better be the word of 2025. I'm sure it was maybe made the list for 2024, but I think there's going to continue to be rapid enhancements in technology, right? For our industry and for industries across basically everything that we touch. And I think the question is going to be which real estate brokerage is really able to empower the agent with technology, not
Mhm.
replace the agent. I think that's a very, very key distinction.
I agree. And many of these disruptive sorts of companies have come up, and they are genuinely trying to displace the agent. You get agents to pay a lot of money for them to collect data, for them to create models that don't actually need an agent in the center of it. I'm
Mm.
super passionate about Compass. I love Compass. It's the best real estate company I've ever been with. And it's largely because despite all the tech, it's very human and culture based. And I love that.
Yeah.
I will say this, I do not trust AI at all. Right now, I'm getting my PhD, as you may or may not know. And I was asked by one of my professors to do an annotated bibliography. And I am crazy busy in real estate, working 100 hours a week. And I thought, okay, I'll just get AI to do it for me, right? And so I plugged in all the things I was looking for, and AI came up with this incredible, perfect annotated bibliography list. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I started because I didn't want to be a complete cheater. I decided I wanted to look at everything and see whether it really related to my topic. And what I found, lo and behold, was that none of the books were
Mm.
real. They all
Wow.
had little citations, everything. And so I asked AI, why would you lie to me like this? Why did you do this? And AI said to me, because I wanted to please you.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Look, I
So
think I
it's
think
dangerous.
yeah. I think AI, in my perspective, and we've been talking a lot about AI at Compass recently. The big function of AI is the input, right? What sort of information does it have access
Right.
to? And so, last week we actually announced a new upgrade to kind of the Compass AI tool that's going to be in beta testing this summer and kind of launched in its initial phase this fall, and then will continue to kind of be built upon. But one of the main things, and this is kind of the future state that we're building towards with Compass AI, is you, Andrea, being able to wake up in the morning and Compass AI is prompting you with, hey, here are 10 clients in your CRM. And
Right.
I've gone ahead and I've created a CMA, comparative market analysis for those clients because their home is worth 25% more based on the CMA analysis than it was when they purchased it. Or, Andrea, here's a buyer of yours who typically was searching in, let's just say, the East Bay, but they've actually started searching in Dallas, Texas, right? Would you like to reach out to them to remind them of the national referral network that you have? And, you as the real estate agent, you are still critical to making those decisions of like, yes or no. Do I want to send that? Do I not want to send that? But that's where I think technology for someone like you work 100 hours a week, I work 100 hours a week. I would love for someone to come in and help me and say, hey, Will, here's something you could be doing. I've gone ahead and I've done some of the work to help make it possible. Would you like to confirm that you'd like to do this or not? That's where I think there's this real powerful moment that will reach this industry. And then
Mhm.
there's small things like, for example, let's say you're selling a house. I was just talking to one of my best friends lives in Malibu. Let's say you're selling a house in Malibu, right? Hey, hey, Compass AI, should I use for the first photo on my listing on compass.com, should I use a photo of the beach or should I use a photo of the front of the house? Right, which has performed better, and we've got all this data
Yeah.
on what
Yeah.
photos are people clicking, and that's where Compass AI can come in and say, Andrea, actually, if you use a photo of the beach, you're going to get 55% more clicks on that first photo.
Right. Right.
That's a
Right.
real edge that I think you will be able to deliver to your clients that other agents they won't be able to. And our goal at Compass has always been how do we give agents an edge? How do we
Right.
help you when you're sitting down in your client's living room on the stools in their kitchen and you're talking about the service that you provide them? How can the brokerage help amplify that service and give you that edge?
That is a beautiful thing. And making sure that that information is accurate is also going to be very
Of
important.
course. Yeah, of course. That's
As I
important.
said, I haven't ever used it again in that capacity, but it has helped me, things like there's a program that's Grammarly. It's really good if you're, not using ellipsis correctly or some such. It'll catch all that and that's good. And I can tell it to do things in 12-point APA style, blah, blah,
Mm,
and it'll do that for me. But I haven't ever used it again to find stuff for me that I'm
sure.
not personally vetted because it's to me I think it's not quite there yet. And
Sure.
it doesn't know morals and it doesn't know ethics and it doesn't know, kindness, although it's very polite. I always say thank you.
Sure.
I've heard is costing all kinds of energy use, but anyway.
Sure.
All right, and as far as this connection that Compass, I mean, do you think we're going to be in a position at some point where Compass agents don't have to be connected to the multiple listing service?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that the MLS is a great thing, right? It
Yeah.
exists as a source of truth, a source of accuracy. Those sorts of things are, I think, really important, to agents across the country, right? A place where you can, search for historical comps, right? A place where you can access listings and information that exists. So I think it's a really important thing, but I don't know the answer to that question.
I was curious about that because, Robert's been on a gigantic crusade around clear cooperation and all of that. How do you feel about that?
I fundamentally believe, Andrea, that homeowners
Mhm.
deserve to be able to choose how to market their home.
I
That's
agree.
it. And I think that if a homeowner makes a decision to do one thing, they make a decision to do another thing or a third thing, all of those choices should be respected. The system should not be built to deprive homeowners of that choice. And I think the really, upsetting thing is that a lot of homeowners don't realize that this choice that they might have, or that, an aspirational choice that we really want them to have, it's either being taken away from them or they don't have it. And
Right.
that's, I think, something that's just as a person, right? As a human being, like, I believe that people should have the choice in how they do things. And
Mhm.
I don't believe they should be forced into doing something.
And do you feel like it's a question of why do you feel like this limitation has been foisted on us all, by the way? I think it's very weird.
Yeah, I think it's probably a longer answer than we have in this podcast.
Hey, we,
Um, I think that, I think the system has not been built around the homeowner, right? And I think if you take a look at yourself, right, as a real estate agent, you're a top performing real estate agent in the United States, one of the top agents at Compass. The things that you do to provide, yeah, exactly, two thumbs up. The things that you do and the services that you offer your clients, they change. They change over time
Right.
because you have to adapt. You have to. I remember an agent telling me, 10 years ago, this was a story from not 10 years ago, but the point of the story was from 10 years ago. They were like,
Right.
I'd never be on Instagram, right? Like, I could never be on Instagram, right? You'll never sell a house on Instagram. Like, oh, how times have changed,
Yeah, no
right?
kidding.
And so I think that you have to be able to adapt. And my mom always says this thing that I think is so important. When I was younger, she would say to me, Will, nothing's ever black or white, right? Like, sometimes you have to live in the gray. You have to be comfortable with kind of adapting and saying, like, it's not right or it's wrong, but you got to kind of like move in that moment. And so that's one of the things that, I've really focused on. I think we really focus on at Compass. And there is this idea that we've talked a lot about, which is homeowner choice, which I was just mentioning, which is really critical, right? Homeowners at a very simple level should have the right to choose how their home is marketed, and they
Mhm.
shouldn't be penalized. They shouldn't be forced into doing something because the system doesn't want them to do that. It's just things are different. And so I don't think that I don't think that idea of forcing a structure is the way that we should be moving forward in this industry. I think that competition should exist because competition is what forces people to get better, right? I think about this all the time. I don't know if you and your family have this. conundrum, but the age-old conundrum of, oh, what do we watch, right? It's a Friday night. Well, what show should we put on? What show should we watch? And I think about that, and like, it's a frustrating, if you ever had that conversation, it's a frustrating conversation because,
Yeah.
you got to figure out what do people want to watch and, what channel and things like that. But then sometimes I think to myself, like, wow, we're so lucky. We get incredible TV. I just had my wife start watching The West Wing, right? Aaron Sorkin, one of my favorite, one of my favorite humans,
Brilliant, brilliant man. Yeah.
a brilliant mind. And I finally got her to watch the first episode of West Wing, and she was just blown away by it. And The West Wing was created, and current TV shows are created because there's competition, right? Apple TV has to compete for HBO Max
Right.
viewers, and Amazon Prime has to step up their game to do the same thing. And without that, what would we have, right? We would have some options, but I don't think they'd be very good. It's this competition that exists that forces companies to get better and provide better things for the public or for their consumers. In this case, homeowners, buyers, sellers, real estate agents, they're our consumer.
I just feel like this breakdown that we're experiencing around, the tariffs, the interest rates. There are a lot of pressures right now on real estate that are not normal. I've been doing this now for 27 years, and in my 27 years as a realtor, I have never seen such pressure on the marketplace as is being exerted right now. And yet, despite all odds, it continues to function. What do you think will be the catalyst to getting more buyers out into the marketplace at this point?
Yeah, I think it's very simple, but the answer is very simple, but unfortunately, how we get to the answer is very complicated. It's
Yeah.
mortgage rates, right? It is simply mortgage rates. If you think about, since COVID to now, not only have you had rapid appreciation in the price of homes, but since 2022, you've also had rapid appreciation in the cost of a home through mortgage rates.
Right.
And so, my perspective is a lot of this is about perspective, right? So mortgage rates today are at 7%. They're about 25 basis points than they were at this point a year ago, right?
Right.
So that's better.
Hmm.
That's causing there to still be more inventory. So there is more inventory today than there was at this point last year, mainly driven by higher mortgage rates, right? As mortgage rates remain high, inventory increases because not as many people are purchasing
Right.
homes. So
Right.
that's a good thing. But what it's really going to take is mortgage rates, I think, dropping below 6. So a mortgage rate that starts with a 5.99 is a huge unlock. There's a very smart person in real estate who said that people react more to the change in rates than the actual rate itself.
I agree.
And so what we've had over the past really 2 months now is an appreciation, an increase in mortgage rates, coupled with tariffs, coupled with other, economic uncertainty that's causing, some people to kind of pump the brakes. And
Hmm.
what we need to start seeing is a reversal in that trend, right? So, how we get there, right, is a little bit of a harder question, but I really do believe it's driven around mortgage rates.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. What is a typical day in the life of Will Hardy working for Robert Reffkin?
I just actually described this to someone. So the way I think about my job is Robert can spend time with kind of three main buckets of people. He can spend time with Compass agents, he can
Hmm.
spend time with investors, and he can spend time with Compass employees, right? Those are kind of the three buckets of time that he has. It's my job to figure out how do I maximize his time with those three groups of people. And so one of the things that I've always wished for with Robert is how do I clone him, right? How could I literally replicate him so that he could be in two places at once? That's obviously not technologically possible. Maybe with AI, we'll get there. But that's not been possible. So a typical day for me, I like to think of myself, Andrea, if you can kind of close your eyes and picture this as a cook in a diner, right?
Okay.
So what I'd imagine being a cook in a diner is like is someone orders, a quesadilla, and then 30 seconds later, someone else is like, I want pancakes. And they've got to cook both things at the same time. And then a third person's like, I want chicken fingers. And there's all this stuff going on. And you've got to be able to kind of seamlessly move between those things that you're doing. That's really what a typical day is for me. So I try and think about how do I make sure that Robert is prepared to show up for our agents, for our employees, for investors? How do I make sure that some of the things that he's focused on driving, the initiatives, they're happening, they're getting done? What are things that I need to be reactive to, right? What are concerns that agents are raising or questions that they have or, trends in the industry that I need to make sure I'm one step ahead of him so that I can kind of brief him and fill him in
Right.
on that. And so it's my job to make sure that every single day Robert is prepared to be the best version of himself for our company and for our industry.
Well, you're doing a brilliant job because he is amazing and he's everywhere. I can't even tell you the number of times I've like received a phone call from him. And I'm thinking to myself, he has 40,000 people to deal with. What the hell?
Yeah.
Like when I did my play, Miriam and Esther,
Yeah.
and he sent me flowers. I have a feeling that was probably you, but
No,
it
no, no, no. That's I think, Andrea, one of the unique things about Compass is that the culture here
Mhm.
is such a culture of connectivity, right? Of positivity, of supporting each other, and of this idea of collaboration. And that starts with Robert, right? Like Robert
Yeah,
still to this day calls every new principal agent that joins Compass. He
yeah,
calls every new employee that starts a Compass.
it's
And I think
unbelievable.
that's one of those things where like that just sets the tone, right? It sets the tone
Yeah.
for what your experience, your time at Compass is going to be like. Is it easy? No, it's not easy, but it's the sorts of things that I think like, what would you as a top performing real estate agent do? Your client has a birthday, your client has an anniversary on their home. Would you ignore it or would you
Yeah,
pick up the phone and call them?
of,
Right? Like
of course,
it's
of
the
course.
same thing. It's the
And
same
you
thing.
set little reminders for yourself, what have you. But some of these out of the box things that he's done to me are amazing. Like one time somebody said something very unflattering about Compass in Min News, and I took great exception to it. And I wrote this little diatribe afterwards. And Robert picked up the phone and called me.
Wow.
Okay. It was like, I don't know, 10 o'clock his time in New
Mm,
York. That's where he was.
sure. Sure.
And I'm like, what the hell?
Sure.
Are you everywhere all the time looking at everything?
He tries. He tries. I try and keep him that way. That's the goal as well. Is I try and keep him out there.
No, he's amazing. Now, your predecessor was Rory Galloyd, is that correct?
Yeah, it's there's been a couple people kind of throughout the transition, but Rory and Netta were both previously Robert's chief of staff.
Exactly. And they have risen to other positions in the company. What are their titles respectively?
Yeah, so Rory is the head of growth and communications and also leads our kind of Western region of the United States.
Mhm.
Netta is the head of operations and leads our Eastern region of the United States. So
So they're essentially compatriots sharing the same job and splitting the country between the two of them.
yeah, correct, correct.
Okay. And so question I have, of course, for Will Hardy is what are your next steps?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been thinking a lot about that. I mean, there's big shoes to fill, right, with Rory and with Netta. One of the things I think about is the kind of constant theme in my time at Compass Andrea has been proximity to real estate agents, right? So whether kind of recruiting them to Compass, whether working with them very closely. And, interestingly enough, my grandmother was actually a real estate agent in Westport, Connecticut. So she was with Prudential at the time. And she, funnily enough, actually sold the first $1 million home in Westport, Connecticut. It's about an hour and 15 minutes outside of New York City.
I grew
Uh,
up in New York, so I know.
Okay, so one of the things that I think was really interesting is my grandfather was an English teacher at the public high school in Westport, and my mom was one of five kids. And you don't need to know much about English teachers or school to know that raising five children on an English teacher's salary is
That would
not a
be
great recipe
challenging.
for
Yes.
success.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that was really amazing was real estate gave my grandmother and their family the ability to provide for their family and raise their family, support them, but also the flexibility to raise them. And I think there are very few careers that provide that. And so I
Right.
think for me, there's this idea that it's hard to imagine what someone like yourself feels in the morning, right? When you wake up, I think especially on like a January 1st, right? Where like the clock ticks over, you're out there every day. You are dealing with clients, you're helping them, you're working hard. But if you're not buying and selling real estate, you're not making money.
Mhm.
And so for me, I think as I think about what's next for Will Hardy at Compass, it's really about making sure that what can I do to help people like yourself, Andrea, be more successful? What can I do to provide you with more time, with more income, with more opportunities, with things that make you look like a rock star to your clients. Like I
Oh,
want your clients saying using Andrea was the best thing in the world. Like I can't imagine buying or selling real estate without Andrea. Like that for me is what really motivates me.
well, that's super lovely. And I expect great things from you, Mr. Will Hardy. You're an amazing person. You have always been very, very lovely to deal with, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I think this is a really interesting episode because you're right at the epicenter of everything that goes on in real estate, literally in the country. So thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. I'm happy to come on whenever you need it.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks. You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Realizations Podcast. I hope our conversation has shed light on the true essence of real estate and the people behind it. As we wrap up, I want to extend my gratitude to our listeners for their support and engagement. Your feedback drives the heart of this podcast, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the Realizations Podcast and leaving a review. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our message of positivity in the real estate industry. Until next time, remember to keep an open mind, embrace empathy, and always seek the good in every situation. I'm Andrea Gordon signing off from Realizations. See you next time.